From homeless black man to millionaire. How Elon Musk and Donald Trump inspired me. The headline flashed across the screen like a wildfire in the night. It screamed success, grit, and crazy twists. Everything that makes people stop scrolling. But the real story? Way darker, way messier. Richard stared at the page, his heart hammering. A billionaire tech CEO, his life packed with power, shiny cars, and cold boardroom wins. Yet here he was, freezing in the biting fog of the city park, staring at a little girl clutching her mother's worn coat. The mom, Clara, was a black woman whose tired eyes spoke of years spent running from life, not chasing it. And that girl, Lucy, her tiny fingers gripping hope tighter than anything else. It was a cloudy morning, the kind where the sky always felt like it might collapse. Richard had just stepped out of his sleek black SUV, glancing at his phone, his mind buzzing with stock prices and meetings. But then Clara's silent gaze met his. She said nothing, just a tired nod. Lucy smiled shyly, her teeth chipped, eyes wide and curious. Something slammed into Richard's chest, a weight he hadn't felt in decades. Memories crashed through him like a thunderstorm. The sting of a father who chased success and left his own child behind. The cold, echoing emptiness of betrayal and absence. That sharp knot tightening his throat, the tremor in his shaking hands. He recognized it. Not from business, but pain. The air thickened. Richard dropped his phone, heart thudding. The past slapped him hard, and suddenly Lucy's face wasn't just a face. It was his. The same curve of the chin, the same restless spark. The blood froze in his veins. That little girl, pumped! She was his daughter, his flesh and blood, born from a brief, wild affair he'd buried in shame. Shock paralyzed him. How had he missed her all these years? How had Clara survived without him? All the power, all the cash, meant nothing compared to this secret family, this raw wound that now screamed to be healed. A crowd nearby whispered, some curious, others judgmental. Is that him? The tech mogul with a hidden past? Eyes flicked between Richard and Clara like a silent courtroom. The city had no mercy for secrets, but crossing back toward them wasn't easy. His wife, ambitious, polished, a queen of social pages, lined up against him already. Her icy glare said one thing: lose this mess or lose everything. The life, the empire, the image, it all hung by a thread. And then the nightmare began. A leak inside Richard's company threatened to spill corporate skeletons onto the world stage. The scandal could crack the empire he built, destroy the fragile chance of redemption. Richard stood there, heart pounding, caught between two worlds. The cold fortune he'd cultivated, or the messy, imperfect family waiting for him in that park. The weight of choices hammered his mind. Step toward the daughter he never knew, or retreat into the fortress of success. A cloud rumbled in the sky. The future blurred. What will he choose? Power or family? Take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any exclusive content that's coming. And since you're here, drop a powerful like. That really helps me with the algorithm. Oh, and let me know in the comments, what city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. Richard stood there, heart racing, every beat echoing the weight of his choice. Clara's tired eyes held pain and hopes he didn't understand yet. Lucy's innocent smile cut through the fog of his guilt. But before he could step forward, a sharp scream shattered the tense air. "Help! Somebody help!" A woman's voice rang out from the edges of the park, piercing the heavy silence. Richard turned, instinct kicking in. A few yards away, a group had gathered around a man crumpled on the ground. He was pale, his face twisted in a grimace. Frantic hands pressed to his chest, gasping for breath. The crowd swelled, an ocean of eyes wide with a mix of horror and curiosity. Panic buzzed in the air. Something twisted in Richard's gut. Memories of his own struggles surged. The whispers of his past, the shame of his choices, now felt utterly insignificant. Without thinking, he dashed toward the commotion, the cold pavement firm beneath his feet. Clara's gaze followed him, confusion and fear swirling. Lucy's small hand clutched her mother's. Richard squeezed through the throngs of onlookers, heart pounding anew. "Get back," he shouted, forcing his way to the man's side. What had happened? Was this a heart attack? Did he need CPR? As he knelt beside the stranger, he saw the man's eyes roll back, his body going limp. Fear gripped Richard like a vice, a helpless watch of someone drowning. "Stay with me! Stay with me!" Richard shouted, placing his hands on the man's chest, feeling the rapid beats of a faltering heart. Then it happened. A loud crack fractured the moment, like thunder between them. The man's eyes didn't just flutter. They snapped open, filled with sudden clarity and rage. "Shut it down," he gasped, spitting out blood. "They know! They know everything!" Panic twisted his features as fresh blood dripped from his lips. The crowd gasped, whispers darting between them. "There's no escape!" A chill wrapped around Richard, icy fingers squeezing his heart. What was he talking about? Before Richard could grasp what was unfolding, the man collapsed back into silence. A medic rushed through the crowd, pushing Richard aside, their expressions rapidly shifting to serious urgency. Richard stepped back, his own breath shallow. Suddenly, a mutual gaze caught his attention. Clara's eyes widened, disbelief washing over her. Importantly, she knew the man. Richard followed her stunned expression, eyes zeroing in on the one person standing eerily still within the chaos. It was Clara's brother, the last face he expected to see today. The man who had often been the shadow to Clara's light. The gossip of family gatherings, cryptic phone calls he had intentionally ignored. "Jack!" Clara whispered, shocked. "What are you doing here?" But it wasn't just confusion on her face. There was fear, a trembling truth sinking in, the kind that shattered lives and built walls too thick to break. Richard felt the blood drain from his face. This was not just about him anymore. Jack grinned, a sly smile that turned Richard's stomach. "You think you can leave us, brother?" he sneered. "The past never really ends, does it?" A collective gasp rattled through the crowd. Richard's heart dropped, spinning. Secrets he had kept buried like stones in a deep river were rising like smoke. Faces that witnessed his rise suddenly turned cold, judging. The facade of wealth and success hung like a fragile thread, swaying precariously above a pit of shame and dread. Richard's mind raced. He had to choose between family and fortune, But suddenly, it felt like he had lost both, teetering on the edge of a looming storm. With every heartbeat, the truth clawed at him, screaming louder. Who really was he? What had he built? The world closed in, the horizon blurred. Nothing felt secure anymore. What would happen next? The answers hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The park felt smaller, the crowd thicker, and the weight of what lay ahead was a darkness Richard could no longer ignore. Richard stood there, heart racing, the weight of his world pinching him tighter than ever. All he could see was Clara's weary face, Lucy's curious smile, and his life as a corporate titan fading into a blur. Power or family? The choice echoed in his mind. But before he could move, a distant scream shattered the tension. A woman's desperate cry cut through the park's fog. Richard turned, eyes wide. A small crowd had gathered a few feet away, panic rippling through the onlookers like a flickering flame. People recoiled in shock, gasping and pointing. In the center of the chaos lay a man, face down on the pavement. His clothes were ragged, dirty. Richard's gut twisted as he recognized the figure. Jamal, a local homeless man who often scoured the park for scraps. Richard had seen him many times before, his eyes hollow, hope buried beneath layers of grief. But today, Jamal was still, too still. Richard swallowed hard, inching closer as murmurs of "What happened?" and "Is he dead?" filled the air. Clara stepped back, pulling Lucy away, instinctively shielding her from the scene. Richard felt hot bile rising in his throat. Just then, a woman pushed through the crowd, her face pale, eyes wide. "Get back! Call an ambulance!" She knelt beside Jamal, her hands trembling as she rolled him onto his back. The sight was chilling. The man's eyes were glassy, unseeing. Richard froze, a shockwave of confusion twisting inside him. He wanted to run, to merge back into his secluded world. But something rooted him to that spot. Memories of his own desperation, his own struggles echoed inside. Suddenly, the woman gasped, pulling something from Jamal's pocket. It was a crumpled photograph, stained with age. She held it up, trembling, and Richard squinted. His heart plummeted as he recognized the faces. Jamal, Clara, and a much younger Lucy, smiling brightly against the backdrop of the park. A deep twist of horror rolled through him. "What?" he began, but words failed him. The whispers around him intensified. "That's odd. Why are they together?" Richard's mind reeled. Clara's eyes met his, wide with disbelief. The woman continued. "He's the father. Jamal is Lucy's dad." Silence fell like a blanket, heavy and suffocating. Richard's chest tightened, the sound of blood rushing in his ears, drowning out the murmurings around him. But how? The questions flooded in. Had Clara hidden this? Was their life a facade? Jamal's body lay lifeless, but the truth was worse than anything Richard could have imagined. Everything he thought he knew, every certainty, shattered like glass. Then, as if on cue, Clara stepped forward, her voice shaking. "I didn't want to tell you. I was scared." The crowd leaned in, rapt, as more secrets hung in the air like fog. Richard's mind raced. He had come here to confront his past, and now he discovered he was simply a footnote in a larger tragedy. All those years of hard work and ambition, they meant nothing. Love, family, betrayal, those were the real currencies of life. But the park remained silent, holding its breath. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Richard stood, paralyzed by confusion, pain gripping his heart like a vice. The future loomed large and uncertain. What would happen now? With secrets laid bare and choices looming, could his empire survive this revelation? Could any of it mean anything? The ground beneath him shifted, and he couldn't tell which way to move. Richard stood there, paralyzed by confusion, as the sirens wailed in the distance, inching closer. A haunting reminder that the world outside was crashing in. Clara's eyes were wild, her mouth moving, but no sound escaping. The crowd was a living, breathing entity. Whispers darted among them, gossip feeding on the moment. He couldn't process the scene unfolding in front of him. Jamal is Lucy's dad? The words barely formed in his mind, let alone made it to his lips. It felt like the ground shifted beneath him. What did this mean? Clara's past wrapped around him like a heavy fog, stinging his heart in ways he hadn't even begun to comprehend. Then came a subtle stir below Jamal's lifeless body. Richard squinted, hope flickering like a candle in a storm. It was almost imperceptible. Was it just his imagination? The crowd held its breath, and as if answering their collective prayer, Jamal gasped. Colors swirled around Richard. The world narrowed to the space between him and the man who had been a ghost. Jamal's eyes fluttered open. They were filled with confusion, pain, and something deeper. "I need to tell you," he murmured, voice barely above a whisper. But Clara jerked forward, her hand shooting out. "No!" Her voice rang out like a bell in the chaos, sharp and demanding. The crowd leaned in closer, tension crackling in the air. "Clara, let him speak," Richard urged, but she shook her head violently, fear etched deep into her features. "Stay away from him," she shouted, her words unexpected, slicing through the confusion like a knife. Richard felt his heart drop. This was not just some random connection. This was vital, a pulse of truth begging to emerge. But Jamal's eyes locked onto Richard's, piercing right through to his soul. "You don't know," he gasped, straining for breath. "You're not who you think you are." The ground fell from Richard's feet. The world around him twisted, swirling into shadows. "What do you mean?" Richard managed, his voice barely a whisper. The horror glimmered in Jamal's eyes. "They've played us all," Jamal coughed, struggling to sit up, and the crowd gasped. "Clara, I know about the switch!" Every breath in Richard's body froze. His mind reeled as his world cracked wide open. "Switch?" he echoed, each syllable dripping with fear. "What do you mean?" Jamal grunted, blood trickling from his lips as he met Clara's wide gaze. "You can't keep it, the truth. It'll ruin everything, about all of us. Your life, Richard. It's a lie." Gasps cascaded through the crowd. Richard felt like a puppet suddenly aware of strings pulling at him from all sides, unraveling him piece by piece. "Clara?" he said, looking back at her with rising dread. "Please," she begged, her voice trembling. "Don't do this." But it was too late. The universe shifted. the weight of the entire park seeming to tilt with it. Secrets spilled like ink across a page, threatening to paint their lives in only shadows. Richard felt Clara's grit slip away, her truth sinking like a stone through the muddy depths. "I've seen it all," Jamal forged on, the fire of resolve flickering in his eyes. "You're not the man everyone thinks you are, and neither am I." The revelation hung thick and heavy, settling over them like a thundercloud. And Richard's heart raced, pulse pounding in his ears. "What? What do you mean?" "Lucy isn't yours, not as you think," Jamal gasped, his face slick with sweat and urgency. "The truth. It's bigger, and you're in danger." Richard's insides knotted, breaths coming in sharp gasps. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the next revelation that would rip apart the fabric of his carefully constructed world. What did he really know? Who was he? The park felt smaller. The air was thick with tension. As the first light of dawn flickered on the horizon, the truth loomed dark and heavy, waiting to drop. And everything he believed began to unravel. Would he face the storm that was about to break? What lay ahead? Real salvation or greater despair? The line was thin, and Richard stood on the edge, staring down into an abyss of secrets that would change everything. The air crackled as Richard stood there, frozen, the weight of his choices pressed against his chest, suffocating. One step toward his daughter, or retreat into the glimmering prison of his corporate life. Just then, a shout pierces through the thick tension in the park. "Get down! Get down!" A figure burst from the edge of the playground, a man with wild eyes and a backpack slung over one shoulder. Chaos erupted. The crowd began to scatter, hearts racing, screams vibrating through the air. Richard's instincts kicked in. This wasn't just a scene from a movie. It was happening right in front of him. Before he could think, he grabbed Clara's arm. "We need to get out of here!" But she was frozen, eyes wide, clutching Lucy tightly. No! He couldn't lose them in the chaos! He turned back to the man shouting, hoping it was just a prank, a joke gone too far. "Sir!" Richard yelled, trying to be calm. "What is going on?" And then the slight glint of metal caught Richard's eye. The man's backpack was bulging, unzipped, with wires hanging out. His heart raced. This wasn't a harmless situation. "Stay back!" the man shouted, waving his arms frantically. "I need to show you something. I know who you are." "I know what you've done." Gasps filled the park. Richard's breath caught in his throat. Did this man know about his past? Did everyone else? The weight of shame and fear settled deep, a turmoil slushing inside him. "Richard!" Clara's voice trembled as she stepped forward, Lucy still pressed against her. "What does he mean? What does he know?" Before he could answer, the man's hand dove into his backpack. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Richard's heart nearly stopped as he stumbled back. "Wait!" he shouted, panic crawling up his spine. "Don't do anything!" But the man pulled out a laptop, not a weapon, but a device that seemed to flicker with information. Richard squinted, mind racing. "This is for you!" the man shouted, urging the crowd to stay away. "This shows everything. Your dirty secrets, the people you forgot. I'm exposing you all." Suddenly, a piercing siren filled the air, police cars rushing toward the park. Richard felt the stirrings of nausea. His empire, his perfect life, faltered under the weight of this impending scandal. The man pointed directly at Richard. "Everyone deserves to know about your daughter and the others." The world twisted. Richard felt the ground beneath him sway. Others? What did he mean? Then it hit him hard, like a slap in the face. Were there more children? More mothers? A life hidden beneath the shroud of wealth and success? His eyes darted to Clara, who was now pale, trembling. Lucy clung to her, blissfully unaware of the storm. Would the truth shatter them? Would it shatter him? The fear knotted hard deep in his gut. The sirens blared louder. Officers flooded into the park, directing the crowd to clear away. Richard stood in the eye of chaos, staring into the faces surrounding him. Some were sympathetic, others filled with shock and judgment. All he wanted was clarity, a moment to breathe, but there was none. Just more questions hanging thick in the air. What had he built, and what would it take to burn it down? The secret man with his device was only the beginning. Richard's life was unraveling layer by layer, and in a moment of realization, he understood. He wasn't just fighting for redemption. He was facing a tempest that could consume everything he had ever known. Before he could move, the sirens intensified, drowning out his thoughts. And Richard took one last look at Clara and Lucy. His heart raced. He was caught between the swirling storm of past mistakes and the brutal truth looming ahead. What path would he take now? Power or family? Secrets or revelations? The choice was no longer his alone. Richard's heart raced, caught between two worlds, the sterile boardroom where he reigned, and this foggy park where reality tore at the seams. The daughter he had never known stared back at him, eyes wide with hope. It was a moment heavy with everything unspoken. And then, a loud explosion cut through the air. A car, a few hundred feet away, burst into flames, sending shards of glass and metal flying. The park erupted in chaos. People yelled, scrambling for cover. Clara pulled Lucy close, shielding her small body. Richard's instincts kicked in. He dove towards them, urgency fueling him as panic danced around. The blast knocked him off his feet. A sharp pain shot through his side as he landed hard. The world spun. The crowd gasped, a collective breath held in horror. And amidst the smoke and confusion, Richard glimpsed a figure emerging from the flames, a silhouette, tall and menacing, stepping into the chaos with an unnatural calm. His breath caught. It couldn't be. Richard! The voice sliced through the chaos, familiar, cutting like a blade. You think you could just abandon us? His ex-wife, Maureen. But the surprise was deeper than that. Behind her stood men in dark suits, faces masked in sirens' red and blue light. His mind raced. This was not a coincidence. It felt staged, a spectacle designed to weigh him down with guilt and fear. "What are you doing here?" he shouted, scrambling to his feet, adrenaline sending sharp spikes of pain through his body. The crowd surged and staggered, but his focus was on her. The woman he thought had stepped out of his life years ago. Maureen's mouth twisted into a cruel smile. I came to remind you of where you come from and what you left behind. Her gaze shifted to Clara, to Lucy. Seems you've made a real mess of things, haven't you? Ho 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 ho. The air thickened with acrid smoke. Richard's mind raced. He had fought tooth and nail to rise above, a life made of grit. But here was a reminder that some pasts didn't just vanish. They smoldered and sparked like the flames behind her. The crowd murmured, whispers of judgments forming. Isn't that Richard Steele, the tech mogul? Look at him now. Their eyes, once filled with awe, now flicked with pity and scorn. Did you think you could just build an empire, forget your roots, and we wouldn't expose your lies? Maureen leaned forward, eyes glinting with malice. Richard's heart sank. All those years of success, the polished image, it was hanging by a thread. The scandal he had tried to shield was now bleeding through, and Maureen was the one holding the knife. Get away from them, he snapped, rage bubbling into a tempest. But he felt chained by her words, trapped by choices made long before Lucy existed. A siren wailed in the distance, but it felt like a lullaby compared to the chaos within. He stood between the family he had just discovered and the ghosts he thought he had buried. Choose, Richard. You can keep running or face the truth, Maureen taunted, stepping closer. Stay back, he shouted, but the command felt hollow. Lucy clutched Clara's coat tighter, unaware of the storm raging before her. Richard's breath hitched. This was more than a clash with his past. It was a challenge that would rewrite everything. What was he willing to sacrifice to protect the child he never knew? The smart man, the millionaire, faced the wreckage of the life he had built and the reality of the one left behind. And then Maureen pulled something from her coat, a document, papers fluttering in the wind. This, she declared, her voice ringing with finality, could unravel everything. Richard's heart dropped. Panic surged as the implications settled in. His entire world teetered on the edge of collapse. Could it be true? What lay hidden would shake him to his core. Would he choose power or dive into the depths of a family he didn't know? As uncertainty gripped him, the ground below felt unsteady, and the stage was set for a reckoning more dramatic than he ever imagined. Richard stood there, the weight of the moment pressing down like a storm cloud ready to burst. His pulse raced, caught between the child he'd never known and the empire he had built on carefully curated silence. Just as he took a tentative step toward Clara and Lucy, the world around him erupted. A piercing scream shattered the thick air. "Run!" someone shouted, fear slicing through the park like a knife. The innocent scene transformed in an instant. People scattered, faces painted with panic. Richard's heart leaped, confusion swirling. What was happening? Then he saw it, a figure bursting from the trees. A man, wild-eyed and ragged, wielding something shiny that glimmered in the gray light. "Get down!" shouted a man nearby, yanking his wife and child to the ground. Richard's instincts kicked in as he scanned the area, adrenaline surging. Lucy clung to Clara, her innocent eyes wide with fear. Everything moved in slow motion, a chaos of screams and the pounding of feet. Richard's body ignited, a fierce protectiveness flooding his veins. His mind raced. Was this a robbery? A terror attack. The man's voice boomed, frenzied. "I know the truth. I know who you are." The crowd shifted. Anxious murmurs rising. Richard's breath caught. Those words weren't directed at just anyone. They were meant for him. "Who are you?" Richard demanded, stepping forward, the sleek millionaire facade stripped away, replaced by a desperate father. But before the man could respond, he spun, pointing the shiny object, a gun, at Clara and Lucy. Time froze. Richard felt a chill race down his spine. "No!" The word escaped his lips, a raw plea. The man's eyes flickered with recognition. "You're her father," he spat. A mix of anger and pity. "You abandoned her! You thought you could just walk away?" Everyone around held their breath, the air electrified with tension. Clara's face turned pale, the weight of years of struggle crashing down over them. Richard's heart sank, a tidal wave of shame drowning him. "Who are you?" Richard asked again, his voice steadier this time, determination clawing its way to the surface. The man hesitated, then lowered his weapon slightly, but the fire in his eyes remained. "I'm the brother you never wanted to acknowledge, the one left to pick up the pieces when you took off to build your empire." Shock hit Richard like a punch. Brother? He had no idea. All those years, all that success, was this what it cost him? He barely knew anything about family if this man was telling the truth. He felt Clara's eyes on him, searching for answers he didn't have. "The daughter you never knew," the man sneered, "is the only part of you that matters now. You need to choose, Richard." The tension was unbearable, each heartbeat a countdown. The murmurs of the crowd intensified. Is he telling the truth? What does he want? Richard's world tilted, a terrifying question looming in his mind. Was this really who he was? The powerful mogul who left people in the dust. As the siren's wail echoed in the distance, he felt trapped between two realities, the fortune and facade he created, and the truth unraveling before him. What kind of man would he be if he turned his back once more? The air crackled with uncertainty. Richard took a breath, gazing into Clara's fearful eyes and Lucy's innocent face. His world spun as he understood in that instant that everything was about to change. Would he fight for the past he never wanted to acknowledge? Or would shocking revelations tear apart the life he thought was solid? The sirens grew louder. Now was the moment of truth. The crowd held its collective breath, waiting to see what he would do next. Richard stood there, paralyzed by confusion, as the sirens wailed in the distance, inching closer, a haunting reminder that the world outside was crashing in. Clara's eyes were wild, her mouth moving, but no sound escaping. The crowd was a living, breathing entity. Whispers darted among them, gossip feeding on the moment. He couldn't process the scene unfolding in front of him. "Jamal is Lucy's dad?" The words barely formed in his mind, let alone made it to his lips. It felt like the ground shifted beneath him. What did this mean? Clara's past wrapped around him like a heavy fog, stinging his heart in ways he hadn't even begun to comprehend. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the air. Richard's head snapped up. In that instant, time halted. The man who had emerged from the chaos, the one claiming to be Jamal's brother, stepped forward. Wide-eyed with rage, "You think this is over?" His voice echoed, trembling with fury. "You don't know what you did." Before Richard could react, the man lunged forward, shoving the gun aside and reaching into his bag. The crowd gasped, hands flying to mouths, eyes widening in horror. Everything blurred into chaos again, but instead of a weapon, he pulled out a small, tarnished object, a pendant, glinting in the dim light. "This," he shouted, "captures everything!" He hurled it into the air, and the pendant flew, spinning like a shooting star, before hitting the ground with a metallic clang. In that moment, a dark shadow passed over the gathering. The pendant landed, and with it, an unexpected wave of energy rippled through the air. Richard felt it in the pit of his stomach. Something was about to break. The ground reverberated, and without warning, the pendant shattered, releasing a blinding flash. Everyone screamed, shielding their eyes. Richard squinted against the light, heart racing. When it receded, the crowd stood there, stunned into silence. The man who had thrown it stumbled back, eyes wide with disbelief. But the shock didn't stop there. As the dust settled, Richard's heart dropped. Clara stood frozen, her face draining of color. Her hands clutched Lucy tighter, but the bond between them seemed fractured now. "What have you done?" she gasped, her voice a whisper laced with horror. Richard turned to see the figures of unknown women and men emerging from the shadows, their eyes piercing, their faces eerily familiar. The crowd erupted into whispers. "Who are they? What's happening?" The questions flew, weaving an invisible web of fear. And then it hit him, like a punch to the gut. One of the women stepped forward, her eyes locking onto Richard with a smirk that cut deep. "Surprise! Did you really think you could escape us?" "Who are you?" Richard shouted, voice trembling. But inside, fear gripped him tighter. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. "We've come for what's ours," the woman said, her voice cold, carrying the weight of years lost. "And it's time for the truth to unfold." Richard felt the ground slip beneath him. "What truth?" His voice broke, panic distorted everything. "Your parents," she paused for effect. "They didn't leave you for success. They left you because you're not who you think. You're not Richard Steele. You were adopted." The crowd gasped collectively. Richard's heart raced, blood rushing in his ears. Everything he had built, the identity he had fought for, was it all a lie? Clara's eyes filled with tears, confusion mingling with fear. Lucy's little hand slipped from her mother's grip, and Richard's chest tightened. What did this mean? Who was he really? The air shifted, heavy with the weight of secrets unraveling. The past he thought he could run from surged back with a vengeance, and as the realization sank in, the world around him began to fragment. The sky above darkened, and Richard gasped. Was this the beginning of everything falling apart? Despair clenched at him as he looked at Clara, who seemed just as shattered, and Lucy, oblivious to the storm raging in her father's heart. He wasn't just caught between a family and an empire. He was standing on the brink of a revelation that could drown them all. The ground felt unstable, and as the shadows closed in, Richard stood there with his life unraveling, searching for an answer that might never come. What would he grasp in the face of this new reality? Would anything he believed turn out to be real? The truth was closer than ever, and it felt like a reckless storm barreling straight toward him. Richard stood there, the weight of his pulse raced, caught between the child he'd never known and the empire he had built on carefully curated silence. Just as he took a tentative step toward Clara and Lucy, an unsettling crack split the air. The crowd gasped collectively, eyes darting toward the sky. A flash of bright light erupted above them, illuminating everything. For a brief second, Richard instinctively shielded his eyes. When he opened them again, a massive drone hovered just above, its propellers whirring loudly, casting shadows that danced chaotically across the ground. "What is that?" someone yelled from the crowd, a mix of awe and terror igniting in their voices. Richard felt an icy grip of dread take hold. Was this just another twist in the chaotic scene? Or something much more sinister? Before he could process, the drone descended rapidly, tilting precariously as if it were on the verge of crashing. And then, in a heartbeat, it dropped something. A small, silver object that arced gracefully through the murky air. Richard's stomach sank. Time slowed. He instinctively ducked, ready to protect his family. But the object landed with a pin-drop silence in front of him, softly, almost gentle compared to the chaos. Clara and Lucy were huddled close, fear etched across their faces. And as Richard stepped closer to inspect, his heart stopped. It was a picture, not just any picture. It was an old, worn photograph of Richard and Clara, and two children standing between them. They were grinning, blissfully unaware of the storm that would disrupt their lives. The other two kids looked like mirrors of Lucy. Her eyes, her smile. What? Ha! The words slipped out, choked with disbelief. Just then, Clara gasped, That can't be!" Her fingers trembled as she reached for the photo, but Richard snatched it away in shock. The crowd was neither intrigued nor repulsed. They were frozen, wrapped in confusion. The photograph held secrets, screaming to be uncovered. But how? Richard's mind raced, whirring at light speed. Just then, the loud hum of the drone creaked, the whirring turning to a bizarre, eerie screech. It began to tip dangerously, dipping lower. "Get back!" Richard shouted, pushing Clara and Lucy backward just as the drone exploded into sparks and smoke. A fiery ball of chaos erupting where they stood just moments before. The crowd recoiled, cries of alarm echoing around them. As the smoke billowed, obscuring the scene, fragments of past conversations cut through Richard's mind like jagged knives. Jamal's confession, the claims of being someone else. This whirlwind came racing back, intertwining with the unfolding chaos. Memories flickered, like images from an old film reel, too hazy to grasp. And then, like a ghost breaking through the fog, a familiar face emerged from the haze. Maureen. Her eyes weren't just wide with fear. They were filled with dread and something else. Recognition? Richard's heart sank. In that moment, everything shifted. "Richard!" she called, voice trembling, clawing through the chaos. "You need to listen. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "What are you talking about?" he shouted back, the jib of panic tightening in his throat. But she wasn't the only one who stepped forward through the clouds of smoke. Just behind her emerged another figure, taller, commanding, Jack, Clara's brother. Blood rushed through Richard's ears as the realization sank in. Jack held the pendant, the tarnished object that had shattered everything. "The truth is far deeper, Richard," he shouted over the cacophony, face drawn and serious. "You can't run from what's in your blood." And those words hit like a train. Everything Richard thought he knew cracked wide open. He felt the ground shift beneath him, unsure and insecure. Relationships twisted and knotted, the fabric of his very essence unraveling. The whispers around him grew louder, mocking him, the collective thoughts of the crowd brewing the storm. What were they really hiding? The air crackled with tension and dread. Richard stood frozen in a whirlwind of smoke, secrets, shattered lives, and family he never understood. Inside him, confusion roiled, desperate for clarity. Then Maureen reached out, fear spilling from her every word. "It's not just about you, Richard. Everything is connected." At that moment, realization broke through like a jagged bolt of lightning. As the past loomed ever closer, Richard felt an unraveling within himself, a fracture that could tear apart everything he believed was true. The urgency swirled, but so did the mystery, tighter and tighter, waiting to unleash the storm that could end everything he had known. What truth remained to be uncovered? What would he find if he dared to dig deeper into this web of betrayal and lies? What was coming next? Richard stood in the thick smoke, confusion swirling around him like a storm. Everything he had fought for, every lie he had spun, felt like it was about to crumble. The faces in the crowd shifted from awe to judgment. Clara's eyes were brimming with tears. Lucy hung on to her mother, oblivious to the chaos. Richard felt a knot tightening in his chest. The weight of the moment pressed down like a heavy stone. Maureen's words echoed in his mind. "You're not who you think you are." The truth hung in the air, palpable and cold. It was a chilling reminder of his past, tangled and twisted in a way he never expected. The faces that had emerged from the smoke, the claim that he had a different life waiting. It all felt like a punch. Jamal's brother, Jack, stepped closer, his voice steady but urgent. "This isn't just about you, Richard. It's about family, about choices we made." As he spoke, Richard felt a surge of anger and fear. This man was the key to a truth that threatened to unravel everything. Suddenly, the crowd surged forward, drawn by fear and anticipation. Richard braced himself, glancing at Clara. Her face mirrored his own turmoil, confusion, pain, fear. "You can't let this divide us," Richard shouted, desperation clawing at him. He took a step forward, stopping just short of them, the space between charged with unspoken words. "I need to know. Who am I really?" The words hung in the air. For a beat, silence enveloped them. And then Maureen opened her mouth. "You were adopted, Richard. The truth was buried to protect you." Shock rippled through the crowd. Gasps mingled with the distant wail of sirens. Richard felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Everything he believed about himself fractured, splintering into pieces. He was more than just a tech mogul. He was a man haunted by secrets. "Why didn't you tell me?" Richard turned to Maureen, incredulous. "Why keep this from me?" "Because it wasn't my choice to make," she replied, sadness weighing her tone. "Your parents thought it was for the best. They wanted you to have a better life." In that moment, the pieces of the puzzle began to snap together. All those years of running, of building walls and creating distance, were all part of a reality he had never asked for. It felt like a flood surging over him. He turned to Clara, who looked as though the air had been knocked from her lungs. "Clara, Before he could finish, another explosion rocked the park. This one came from the drone, now a smoldering wreck, filling the air with debris. The crowd reacted, screams erupting, people pushing and shoving as panic surged. Richard's instincts kicked in. "Get Lucy to safety!" he yelled to Clara, who turned and sprinted in the opposite direction, clutching their daughter to her chest. In the midst of chaos, Richard turned back to the man who had thrown the pendant, the man who had brought this mess crashing down. "What do you want from me?" he shouted, frustration simmering. "Redemption," the man replied, lowering his voice so the crowd couldn't hear. "You owe it to those you left behind. You need to step up and make things right." Richard felt a fire ignite within him. Redemption? Wasn't that what he was chasing all along? The crowd that had been so focused on the spectacle around them was now witnessing a man reclaiming his truth. In a haze of adrenaline, Richard stepped forward. "I'm not running anymore. If the truth is all I have left, then let it be known. I won't hide. I'll face everything head on." Murmurs spread through the gathering as adrenaline thrummed in his veins. This was it, the moment to stand up, not just for himself, but for the family he wanted to build. In that frantic moment, hope blossomed amidst the chaos. As the sirens got closer, Richard knew he couldn't turn back now. What lay ahead was uncertain, shrouded in shadows and doubt. But before the storm could take everything, Richard embraced what was coming, ready to face the truth and rebuild. So are you ready to join him on this journey? Don't wait any longer. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the upcoming exclusive stories. And remember to smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. Let's hear what you think. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this ending. Your support matters. This is the moment to show your love for the channel.